Alrighty, now that I've officially cleared Pit Tier 100 on Blight, something that really shouldn't have been able to be accomplished this season, let's go ahead and talk about the build guide. I am going to be covering both the base variant of it, as well as the Varshan power variant of it that you might have been seeing recently. If this is post what I assume is the inevitable fix for that, I don't want to leave you hanging out to dry. But realistically, Blight is somewhere around a B to low A tier build that is incredibly good for speed farming open world content, as well as doing Undercity and Infernal Horde, and then can do decently well in the pit as well. Say that 10 times fast. But again, let's go ahead and start talking about it. I'll play some footage in the background just to keep you entertained, and we can talk about what you should know about the Blight Necromancer in Season 8. While I perpetually get asked the question, what is the laziest build, what is the easiest build, what is the best build, what is the fastest build, Blight checks a lot of these boxes in a lot of different ways. Basically, all you really need to do on the build is hold down the Blight button every once in a while, cast Soul Rift. If you want to get a bit sweatier, you can also use a combination of rune words as well as the other skills on your skill bar, be able to do more damage, be more impactful, be more tactical, and make better decisions in combat scenarios. But realistically, all you need is Essence and at max attack speed, and you're going to do just fine on this build. Considering it's a darkness build, it gets to max out Reaper's Pursuit, as well as a huge amount of ranks on your amulet, so you reach movement speed cap without even needing movement speed on your boots, which is pretty cool, since you can fit in additional survivability stats or additional damage stats, or even essence per second to be able to help to upkeep your various costs. Hilariously enough, the strongest version of this build, without the boss powers, is actually going to use one less mythic as well, so you ultimately want to use Helm of Lucian. Sadly, in Season 8, it's currently turned off, so we actually can't. But that would actually be the best in slot helmet. So at the end of this, really, all you need are 2 uniques and 2 mythic uniques. I know, only 2 mythic uniques. Sue me, I'm a blaster. I gotta talk about the best of the best, or people are gonna think that my build sucks. But it really cannot be overstated just how good of a speed farmer Blight is. You hit a massive area with all of your damage. In open world, your dots are so powerful that you basically just fire off 1 or 2 and then you keep running. You don't even need to stop, because everything is just gonna end up dying behind you. With the ability to put on the Jaw rune word for additional teleport, meaning massive amounts of mobility, and basically a free aspect slot on the build, meaning that you can run Inexorable Reaper, turning Sever on your skill bar just from a Reaper's Pursuit buff literally into a secondary mobility skill. Blight might be our fastest build. But let's go ahead and talk about the Varshan part very quickly at the beginning so I don't waste anybody's time, and also people are just going to be looking for this information. But then again, I also want to make sure that you have the base understanding of what the build will look like without the Varshan power, just in case this thing gets hot fixed, which it almost certainly will. If you haven't seen my video covering this, it got a little bit of hype over the weekend because people were finally tuning into this combination. Varshan's literally says when you activate your main boss power, apply a huge amount of shadow damage over time. And since Blight is a shadow damage over time build, we scale this thing ridiculously high. But how do we trigger it so often? Well, we're going to use Flesh Reapers. Flesh Reapers says that when you damage a vulnerable enemy as the main boss power, you will shred away their vulnerability and apply a stun. Now, how do these two things work in concert? You apply vulnerable, it gets shred away, but you can only apply vulnerable so fast. What's the key to unlocking this damage? A Curse Touch aspect on your glove says lucky hit chance to be able to apply Vampiric Curse, and enemies who have Vampiric Curse on them are vulnerable. Not have vulnerable applied to them, but are vulnerable. So this combination with your boss power and being able to continuously trigger it, the more attacks that you get per second and the more projectiles that you hit, more overlapping dots that you hit on, and the more enemies within range, since Varshan's actually hits in an area around you, the more that you stack on exponentially increasing amounts of damage onto targets. So you have permanent vulnerability, you're shredding it permanently, you're triggering this more than 10 times per attack, you're attacking 3 times per second. It's like 50 instances of triggering this per second per enemy. Now this is lagging out servers and it's negatively impacting other people's playtime if you're in a shared server with them. So if you're out in the open world with it, they're going to be negatively impacting people. Do you remember the Evade Spiritborn from before? It's not that bad, but it's getting close. That's why I think it's going to get fixed. But until it does, it's literally free to put these things on. You only really need to level up the Varshan power itself. The level of this does not matter in any way, shape, or form. Now that being said, Varshan's is still probably going to be the best boss power as a modifier on this build because it's just a very large instance of damage over time. So even when they inevitably fix this, we're still going to be using it. To be able to empower it further, we're going to be using Cinerats as a 25% damage multiplier for shadow damage, which corrupting damage is shadow damage over time. And then Harbingers, which just says activating your main boss power, which we're doing all the time, gives us a 30% damage multi if the target is vulnerable, which they're also vulnerable all the time too. The only other real big change to the build for this variant in particular is that we are using Shadow Blight. Now, Shadow Blight is going to be triggering a ton of times per second because it's per dot on the target doing damage. This includes all your corpse explosions, all the Ebon Piercer bolts, all the base Blight bolts as well, and then the pool that they sit in. So this is triggering all the time, which is more damage instances to trigger Varshan more often. Once Varshan gets fixed, you'll see us swap back over to Affliction. So while I have the build guide in the description below, also the build guide on Maxroll is updated with this, I have a Varshan variant and then your normal pit push variant. And then in addition to that, just the normal like ancestral and progressional variants as well. So if you're just getting into the build, check out the earlier ones so you know what to aim for. If you're getting up to the mythic setup, look out for the items that you want to be farming and possibly crafting through your sparks, and then further on and so forth to make the build even stronger. So I'm not going to bore you to death with every other thing on this build, but I do want to touch on the really important stats that make it tick. The first one, oddly enough, is actually going to be attack speed. The exact amount of attack speed that you want to get up to is actually 93.7, so 94 if you're rounding. And one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're getting there, not only having attack speed on pieces of gear with greater affixes, or masterwork critting on something like your Ring of Starless Skies, but always remember that you can actually sacrifice your Bone Golem for additional attack speed. If you don't need this to be able to reach that benchmark, you can always toss on Blood for more increased maximum life. The second important thing to notice is that we're not looking for core stats here. We don't care about getting ranks to Blight. Why is that? Well, if we were to look at Blight's damage very quickly, you'll see that I'm doing 364% of my weapon damage. That is 2,700,000 damage over 6 seconds. But if you look at Ebon Piercer, it doesn't look like I'm doing altogether that much damage, but it's only because the scaling isn't here. Ebon Piercer's damage is something like 12 times our weapon damage, whereas Blight is less than 4 times our weapon damage, and each bolt can all hit the target simultaneously and do their damage over half the time. Ebon Piercer is 99% of the damage of the build without Varshan powers, and it's about 10% of the damage of the build with Varshan powers. So we really do not care about Blight ranks anywhere. We don't care about masterworking for it. We don't care about getting it on our gloves. We don't care about GAs for it. If you get them, it'll help a little bit, but sadly, in the current universe, Ebon Piercer is how you do all of your damage. So being able to apply Ebon Piercer bolts as effectively as possible is the most important thing. Chance to double cast Blight projectiles will also double cast your Ebon Piercer projectiles, so reaching 100% there is incredibly important. That's why you need to roll it both on your amulet as well as on your weapon. The other important thing is to get lucky a chance to be able to restore a resource on your weapon, because we are going to be using Cax Rune. Cax Rune spends all of your resource to double your damage for 1 second, and since all of our dots are applying continuously, that is just basically every 1 to 2 seconds against a single target, we are doubling our damage. It is a huge multi. Everything else that you want on the build is just typical survivability, as well as increased damage scaling. So core stat on intelligence, maximum life, getting attack speed up to 100%, and then just hitting your armor and your resistance caps as well. A really important thing to understand about actual Soul Rift right now is that sadly, every 8 seconds, your Soul Rift's barrier will drop off of your character. I don't know why it works like that. I'm hoping that they will change this thing. But if you ever notice that you're kind of getting tapped every once in a while, that is probably why. Even though it's continuously generating it, it's not refreshing the original stack. That's why you'll notice I'm actually recommending on a Soul Rift build, fully investing into Necrotic Fortitude. And if you wanted to go even further, you could actually invest into Blackmailer Sabotage to have a third redundant source of generating barrier, because even with 18,000 maximum life and full fortified status for more damage reduction, you're still going to get one tapped every once in a while if you're going up against really high pit tier bosses. If that's why it's happening, don't be confused. Sadly, that's the reason. Very specifically, with the Varshan setup of this build, I am using the Cry rune word. This is casting the Spiritborn Vortex. The reason why that is basically anytime that we activate any skill, we will immediately stun all enemies around us, which means that they won't run after us. So it's a lot harder to train enemies around you as long as Soul Rift is active. So the Vortex allows us to proactively pull enemies towards us and then pull them closer to another pack of enemies so that we can corpse tendrils and get everything together. You'll notice that it's different on the main build guide, and that's because if you're not running Flesh Reapers, you don't run into that issue. And then to just very quickly talk about the other aspects that you're using, obviously Damned is going on to your 2 weapon here. We're using Embalmers on the pants because after they removed the 2 utility aspects we used to use for damage, we actually had a free aspect slot open. You could either throw Heart and Bones on here if you want to be a little bit tankier. Since we need to be consuming corpses all the time for a Flesh Eater proc as well as Fueled by Death, this helps us to generate blood orbs even against a single target, so we can also maintain blood begets blood, which we're using in our Paragon setup. Cursed Aura on the boots means that we don't have to use Watt Rune Word to be able to apply our curses. We are using a Curse Touch here. If we weren't using this, just remember that we would be using something like Cadaverous as an additional damage multiplier. And then Sacrificial. Sacrificial gives a huge boost to the shadow damage from our Reaper's Sacrifice, then a huge boost to the vulnerable damage from our Cold Mage's Sacrifice. And then the last weird thing that I get asked about a lot, why damage while fortified on the build? There are other sources, why not use them? One, you're able to just maintain the fortified status 100% of the time, and two, damage while fortified is stronger than darkness skill damage, damage over time, or corrupting damage. It's higher damage than damage to close, generic damage, dot damage. It is literally the best additive that dot builds have. Diablo 4 developers, please give me an actual temper for dot builds that is better than generic damage while fortified. I would love you. Thank you. The damage roll on your Ebon Piercer, the actual damage down here in the bottom, being as close to maximum as possible is by far the most important stat, followed by the ranks to Reaper's Pursuit, then the chance for a Blight to cast projectiles twice, then the ranks to Gloom, then the ranks to Blight. As far as the build and how it pilots, I do think that the boss power version of it right now is definitely like kind of the most frustrating version of the build to run, and let me explain why. So for speed farming, it is goated. It is crazy insane. You could basically fire off 2 or 3 blights and then just run past, and everything will die behind you from all the Varshan procs. Amazingly good for speed farming, great for Undercity, great for Infernal Hordes. It's going into the pit where you will feel this frustration. Not in speed farming. If you're doing like pit tier 80, pit tier 85, you're going to crush through everything. And even if the boss doesn't spawn adds, you do more than enough damage on the base blight build to be able to absolutely eviscerate them. But if you're trying to push on the build before they inevitably change this, just understand, if you get to a boss that doesn't summon adds, it is literally not worth your time. So save yourself the headache, save yourself the frustration. Don't use this as your pit pushing build. You're gonna have a bad time. I want to be as honest as possible. But ignoring the Varshan version of it, where does this build realistically end if you are not using this setup? Probably somewhere around like pit tier 85, maybe maxing out at pit tier 90, just for the amount of time it'll take you to actually clear out the trash without the ridiculous amount of damage from Varshans, and then just your ability to output okay or middling amounts of single target damage. When you aren't using the Varshan powers, you don't really have to worry about single target versus multi-target. You do damage to everything within the group, so it is nice to group up things, but against the boss, it doesn't really matter if there are more or less. You reset all of your cooldowns, you're able to maintain 100% uptime on your Lucky Chance with your resource, so that part doesn't matter. So if you're not using Varshan, you're back down in like the tier 80s, you can run whatever boss you want. It's going to be fine. Check out the build guide as always. That's where I write down like all the extensive explanations of what we're using. It'll include the Mercenary, the Paragon, the skill tree, and all of that. Again, check out the different variants for the different progressions. And if you wouldn't mind, if you're brand new here, you appreciated the guide and you appreciated the breakdown, or maybe you've been having a lot of success with the Varshan boss power interaction, and that's how you found me, consider subscribing to the channel. It would mean the world to me. It would help me out a ton. We've gone over like 1,000 subscribers since the season launch, which is really, really cool. I'm deeply appreciative, and we're trying to get up to 100,000 subscribers. So if we could just do that somewhere around like 36 more times, we would finally get up there. I'd get a little plaque with my name on it, and you know, my dad would be proud of me. That would be great. Thank you very much. Leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below if you found any other cool interactions, you've been trying out any other setups for the build, having fun with it, had any other questions or concerns. I try to answer them all, so let me know down there. I'd love to hear from you. But that's it of me yapping for myself. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.